Steelers Ravens once again, part 3 here this
Part
season.
three.
And I mean, it is obviously two storied franchises who know each other very, very well. John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin have been coaching these two teams against each other at least twice a year for, oh man, shoot, what is it now? 15 years almost, it feels like, between these two head coaches. They're facing off Saturday night at 8 p.m. And I'll ask you to start it off. What's your matchup that matters here with Ravens and Steelers?
Yeah, we can't talk about this matchup without talking about Baltimore rushing offense versus the Pitt run defense, which, again, this is another kind of strength on strength. You look at this Ravens rushing attack, which includes Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, other backs as designed by Todd Monken, who has now entered into head coaching candidate discussions. He, I believe, was requested by the Chicago Bears, among others. The Ravens rushing offense has the best overall grade in the league at 93.6, third best EPA per play, the second most overall EPA. They actually have the second most rushing attempts. They don't even have the most rushing attempts in the league. That belongs to the Eagles. But the Ravens have forced more missed tackles of anybody. I think anybody that's gone against Derrick Henry can tell you that it's very, very hard to bring that man down. And Lamar Jackson, with how elusive of a runner he is, not to mention he's the quarterback, that leads to just so much anarchy when it comes to the offensive backfield. 5.8 yards per carry as a team, 94 explosive runs, which is 17 more than the next best team, which is the Eagles. But this is, again, I kind of boil these matchups down to one stat where I feel like is going to matter the most against the Pittsburgh run defense. So the Ravens have been stuffed just 18.7% of the time, which is a top 10 number. They're ranked 10th, in fact. The thing about the Pittsburgh run defense, though, they are top 10 in missed tackles, meaning lower missed tackles. They do not. They're very sound against the run. They're very good in their gaps. They're very, very solid across the board when it comes to that. So you are going against a team that forces a lot of missed tackles, but the Pittsburgh Steelers don't miss a lot of tackles. So how does that shake out? Who gets the better of one another? The Pittsburgh run defense in general, 73.1 grade, that ranks 8th, so another top 10 number. 221 stops, so that's another key thing with this run defense. That ranks only 20th in the league. So you're not necessarily stopping, you're limiting if you're the Pittsburgh run defense, but you haven't been able to necessarily stuff or stop. That's one of the things that I'm going to be looking at. But again, that the missed tackle rate for the Ravens versus how much the Steelers miss tackles, which they don't. That's going to be interesting to see how it all boils down to that one aspect of this matchup in general.
Yeah, it's not a guarantee that if you stop the Ravens rushing attack that you guarantee you're going to beat them. Like, you can't move the ball.
No.
Obviously, Lamar is unbelievable in all facets of the game, but it feels like on the flip side, if you don't stop or slow down their rushing attack, you almost don't have a chance. Like, yeah, you don't have a prayer to keep up with them. So it's not a guarantee, but it's one of those things where if we don't do this, it's almost a guarantee we lose. So that's just what it comes down to when you're playing a team that's as good as the Baltimore Ravens are. We did a one-off video earlier this week on the PFF YouTube channel, in case anybody out there missed it, talking about what's different about the Ravens defense in the second half of the season, really from week 11 on. And so I wanted to highlight a couple of those numbers because I really do feel as though they mean a lot to this game in particular, which sort of will go into my plus factor, which I'll say in a second here. But I want to explain this. The Ravens defense has been so fantastic over the second half of the season. And a lot of that stems from moving Kyle Hamilton from less of a box safety role, a second level defender role, whether it's been in the slot or more as like a pseudo linebacker, and playing him more in the free safety spot. And along with that, allowing Ardarius Washington to rotate as a free safety. He was primarily just a slot corner, defensive back, whatever you want to call it, type of a player for them. Now they have him and Kyle Hamilton playing more of the back end of that defense. They've been moving Marlon Humphrey into the slot more since then. And you got Brandon Stevens and you got Nate Wiggins that can now play on the outside. So Marcus Williams not as much of a part of this equation anymore. And he just he did not look like he was in position of where he needed to be. Too often he was out of position, I guess I should say. It just felt like I don't want to say he was lost, but he didn't have that confidence to be exactly where he needed to be in this defensive scheme. And when you're playing a free safety role, that's paramount. You've got to be able to manage space very, very well. Washington and Hamilton are. And so when you look at the numbers, weeks 1 through 10, the Ravens defense, 57.9 coverage grade, weeks 11 through 18, 87.9, just incredibly different there. And then when you look at third down specifically, their EPA per play allowed on third down was 25th in the NFL weeks 1 through 10. Now, since week 11, third in the NFL. And their total EPA per play allowed weeks 1 through 10, 26th in the NFL. Since week 11, it's first. So this change has been monumental for them. They're not covering up the line of scrimmage as much. They're running less blitzes, less mug looks, and they're just saying, hey, we're going to cover you better, we're going to cover you tighter, and we're going to get home with 4. It's not like the 4 rushers have like turned superhuman since then, but they're playing better and they're getting home because they're getting that extra half second for the quarterback to hold on to the ball because of how good the coverage is playing. It's that question of like, all right, well, what's the relationship between how good the pass rush is versus how good the coverage is? Like it's complementary, but people are always wondering like, okay, what really matters more than the other? In this instance, the Ravens playing coverage better has helped out their pass rush. They didn't go out and sign somebody at the trade deadline. It's not like the cavalry was coming from anywhere. They just switched stuff up. And because they're playing tighter in coverage, now the pass rush getting a little bit of extra time to collapse the pocket and get home, which you love to see. So that goes straight into, not that I want to hear myself talk for 10 straight minutes, but that goes into my plus factor, which is Russell Wilson in the deep ball. Because I've said this on this show, we've said this on the review show, myself and Dalton Wasserman. The Steelers, it feels like they want to be the Eagles, but they're not as talented as the Eagles. The Eagles are a run the ball, dominate on short yardage situations, shot play type of an offense. That is the type of offense that the Eagles are. With how Russell Wilson has played for them since he has become the starter, that feels like the brand of offense they want to play. But they don't have the Eagles' offensive line, first and foremost. They don't have Jalen Hurts' short yardage ability. They don't have Saquon Barkley in the backfield. And as much as you like George Pickens in contested catch situations, he's not A.J. Brown. So you're trying to play this brand of football with just less talent basically everywhere. And that worries me going into what I just said about the Ravens, because the Ravens are playing you tighter since week 11 than almost any other team in the NFL. That's almost a damn near elite coverage grade as a team. So you could bet that it's going to be a lot of tight window stuff for the Steelers. Nothing's going to come easy for them in this game. And over the last 2 weeks, Russell Wilson, when it comes to those shots, 20 or more yards down the field, 25% or below completion percentage. In order for them to win this game, Carmen, it's got to be above 50. When they faced the Ravens twice this year, he went 1 for 4 on such passes and 1 for 2 on such passes. In this game, to me, he's got to complete 3 or 4 of these, and he's probably got to attempt 7 or 8 if they're going to keep up with the Ravens offense. So a lot of that to say that it's really just that part of the game that I think if the Steelers have a chance to keep up with them at all, one, they've got to play really sound defense like you mentioned, but also Russ has to hit those deep shots against a defense that really has stopped allowing those on the second half of the season. So those are my matchup that matters going straight into my plus factor. So what do you got?
Yeah, that actually goes straight into my plus factor, because my first inclination was to say Russell Wilson too, and maybe not specifically deep balls, but boiling it down, I was like, well, wait a second. Who are those deep balls going to? And they've been going to George Pickens. Has George Pickens been catching those deep balls? Not as of late. This last game, he had 4 catchable targets, dropped 2 of them. And Russell Wilson, on the whole this season, has been incredibly accurate. He has 5.7 big-time throw percentage. That ranks 7th in the league, but just 7 turnover-worthy plays this season, which ranks 41st among qualified quarterbacks. He's got the sixth highest accurate plus throw percentage. Again, one of those advanced PFF metrics that just kind of measure quarterbacks' accuracy and things like that. And you look at George Pickens on the flip side of this, not only did he drop 2 of his catchable targets last week, his 11.7% drop rate is the highest among wide receivers with a minimum of 100 targets this year. So you have to be able to rely on a guy like George Pickens. You have Mike Williams too, but he's older, and I think initially we thought that that was going to be a little bit more of a connection, because I think initially he hit with Russell Wilson before George Pickens did. But the reality of the situation is that George Pickens has to be sound in these playoff games against what you said is such a sound, strong defense at all three levels, which I'm really glad you're highlighting just how much better they've been in the second half of the season. And I think a lot of that is a testament to their new defensive coordinator, Zach Orr, who was promoted from within when Mike Macdonald left to take the Seattle job. That's evidence to me of, all right, he took this job over, went from a position coach to a coordinator position, had to learn things outside of his position, had to learn the players outside of his position. That's why you see Kyle Hamilton kind of being used now more to his strengths. That's why you see certain guys behaving and lining up differently, because Zach Orr finally kind of, it takes a little bit of time to make that transition. That's all it comes down to. But it's such a testament to how good of a coordinator he is that it only took a half a season for him to really figure it out and have this engine humming as well as it is the back half of the season going into the playoffs when you're going to need it the most. So all of that is to say, there's guys that are going to have to step up for this Pittsburgh Steelers offense in order to, again, keep pace with what this Baltimore offense is capable of. And that starts, I feel like, with George Pickens. Yes, of course, Russell Wilson has to be accurate and he has to hit those big time throws and he has to get down the field, but he has to be able to rely on the guy that's going to catch it. And so far, or as of late, I should say, George Pickens hasn't been that guy. We need to kind of turn that around a little bit for the postseason.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below. So if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you become one today.